Hi everybody, this is Bandor Tyrell again, and we're in part 3 of our new video for building a medieval tavern bar for Second Life. And we're going to continue right off where we were. So we just finished making this object, a kind of weird looking object. This is the front and side of the bar cut into individual boards and then beveled so that it looks like a bunch of boards. It's very clean and very crisp, which a medieval bar wouldn't be that crisp. So I'll show you a technique for how to make it look a little more rough in probably the next video. But for this one, what I want to do is I want to show you, I want to take this into Substance Painter now so you can get an idea of some of the things that I've been talking about like the wood grain and how does the wood grain appear and what does it look like. It's just throwaway because we're not done, so whatever we're doing, we can't really keep it, but we can keep the setup for it. So to get over to Substance Painter, we have to export the model out of here. So I'm going to select just this piece. We're going to go up to File and Export. And in my previous videos, I told you to export it as Wavefront OBJ Experimental for the best results. I found that that's not necessary. You don't need to export the model in two different formats, one for Second Life and one for Substance Painter. Just Collada works well enough for both. So it saves me a lot of time now. I only have to deal with one format. So just export to collada.dae. Under Operator Presets, you can select SL and OpenSim Static. I don't know if this is really necessary. I just do it because it's here, but I've never actually seen any. If I forget to do it, I don't think it makes any difference, but we'll just do it. Then we name it. I'm going to call this Test Bar Front. Caps. Test bar front. And I'm going to store it in my documents folder and then export it. All right, now we're going to bring up Adobe Substance Painter. So I have both the algorithmic Substance Painter from a couple years ago and the new Adobe Substance Painter. I like the new one from Adobe much better, but I like my setup from the other one better. And I like a lot of the materials. These are your materials here. I have a lot of materials collected in my old one that for some reason don't work in the new Adobe. It's like parts of them are missing and they're not included with Adobe, so you end up with blank textures. So I found that was a problem. I fixed a lot of them by porting over my algorithmic account to my Adobe account, and that seemed to correct some things but not everything. So what I end up doing, for certain textures that I know that I have that I like, I actually load the model up in the old version of Substance Painter and do them there. I'm getting more and more used to the new version and the stuff that I've added to it. So I've got a bunch of good stuff in here now. I also told you wrong in a previous video. I was going with what I knew at the time about how to set this up. I found for exporting to Second Life, it wasn't giving me the best results. And I noticed some of my shadows didn't look right. Some other things weren't looking right. The specular material wasn't looking right. So I went back and looked at how I was doing it in the algorithmic version of Substance Painter and realized I was doing it different. So I kind of copied my setup from the algorithmic Substance Painter into the Adobe Substance Painter. And now I'm much, much happier with the results. So we're going to explain how to do that. So to bring the model in here, you're going to go up and do File, New. That's going to create a new project. The template that we're using, I had told you previously to use a different one. This is the one I'm using now. And I may experiment with this some more because this is not exactly the one I was using in the old algorithmic one, but it has the parts that I think we need. So you want one with metallic roughness because you're going to use that data to produce the specular for your model. I went by something someone else had told me, and they were using a height map for the specular. I think they were using a height map, and it just didn't look right. This comes out way better. So I'm using V-Ray Metal Metallic Roughness Starter Assets as the template that we need. Then you're going to, under File, you're going to click that, and you're going to go to Documents or wherever you save your file, and oh, that's the wrong documents. There you go. That was my D drive. Then we're going to come down here and pick a Test Bar Front. There it is. Hit Open. We're going to change the resolution to 2048 to get better looking graphics. Leave this at OpenGL because Second Life uses OpenGL for normals. And in the old version, you had to change it. In the new version, you don't have to. It comes up that way by default. The rest of this stuff, I don't even know what it is. I don't care. Hit OK. And now your model is in here. Be very, very, very careful. The navigation controls in Substance Painter are different than they are in Blender. So in order to rotate, you have to hit Alt and left click and then drag. Ooh, you can see the HDRI. That's cool. So there's my bar front in Substance Painter. Now we have to produce things like the ambient occlusion, the AO file, and a bunch of other stuff that we need to make it look good. Some of it Second Life doesn't care about, but Substance Painter does. And you need it for Substance Painter, like a curvature model. I don't even know what a curvature or a thickness model. I don't know what they are, but Substance Painter uses them to produce the output to look right. And so we need them in Substance Painter, so you have to set it all up. And then when we're outputting things, well, it outputs based on how those things were set up into the format that Second Life needs. So if you don't have them, it's going to look flat. It's not going to look as good. It won't have edge detection and things like that. So to get that set up, the very first thing you do once you import your object in here is you need to bake your textures. Bake your texture maps onto here. Now, I didn't do something before in Blender that I should have done, which is to assign a material to this object. But since I only have one object, it's using the default material. It's going to work okay. But if I had multiple objects, you have to assign a different material to each of the different objects that you want to paint. So I forgot to do that. I know it because up here in the upper right hand corner in my texture set list, it says default material. That's how it names the parts. It's based on the material. So it doesn't matter what I name this object in Blender, the name here comes from the material. So I didn't apply one, so the name of this object is default material. Okay, so to bake your texture maps, it's over here on the texture set settings, which is next to layers. And then you just scroll down until you see the button that says bake mesh maps. So you click bake mesh maps. Opens up this panel. First thing is you want to set the output size to be the same size, 2048. Dilation width, we're going to leave at 32. Apply diffusion and use low polygon mesh as high polygon mesh. We turn those on because you need, I don't even know what diffusion is, so I don't know, but the output comes out cleaner when you turn that on. But high poly parameters are these things. All of these things are missing. That's why it's got an exclamation mark here. It says, this baker allows you to extract a tangent space normal map from a high definition mesh. Well, all we've given it so far was actually the low mesh. We haven't actually told it what high definition mesh to use. Well, I don't have a high definition mesh. I didn't make two. So you tell it the same one. So you just click here to pick, and you go back down and you pick test bar front. And then notice now it's not broken anymore. It's not exclamation warnings. It's telling you there's a cube here. It's telling you that it's going to generate these, all of these different things, and all of these different things are parts of what Substance Painter uses to produce the best output. Now we don't even use some of them, but that's okay. Now we need to change a couple of the parameters on here. So the only ones we have to worry about are ambient occlusion. So you click on that, and then you take the secondary rays and you slide it to 256. And if you have multiple parts, there's a button here that says apply to all. Since we only have one part, it doesn't matter. So you do that, you go down to curvature, do the same thing. Secondary rays to 256. Thickness, secondary rays to 256. Once you've done that, then you can click bake selected textures. But there's one other thing I want to show you. So if you do bake selected textures, it takes a few seconds to run. And I should come up with some story to tell you while it's doing it. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, people didn't have to wait for mesh maps to render. Hey, okay, it's done. All right, so now it's produced an ambient occlusion. I didn't have to make an ambient occlusion in Blender. It made it for me. And then if I want to do my textures in Photoshop, I can take the ambient occlusion into Photoshop and then combine it with some other texture like a wood grain texture to produce the final output. We're not going to do that because we're going to do it here, but we could. But you also could do it for things like floor shadows. All right, so I want to show you what happened when I just used the default lighting. So see how dark this side is? And then let's rotate it around. Look how bright this side is. All right, this side looks really, really shiny. And this side's really, really dark. The reason is because by default, Substance Painter uses HDRI or EXR images for the lighting. And that's why you can see it reflected on the surface of it. You can see there's like a picture. That's the default HDRI reflecting off the surface. And okay, but it's one-sided. That means the light source is only projecting from one side of the model. So the light's hitting the other side, this side's dark. That doesn't work in Second Life because Second Life you want to be able to go all the way around an object and have the lighting be consistent. You don't want to have, unless this is against the wall, it shouldn't be dark, right? So you have to have two-sided HDRIs. And I have a video on, actually I haven't made a video. I will make a video on how to make two-sided HDRIs. There is a really good video out there already. Just look for two-sided HDRI and you'll find it. So to do that, you have to come up with your display settings, and this is where our environment map, that's the lighting source, is at, and it's using this one called Panorama. So you click that, Panorama's right there. I created a two-sided version of it called Panorama Two-Sided. So you click that, lo and behold, my lighting changes. Well, this is just the lighting in my display. When I bake the mesh maps, it creates 2D files for all that. Well, the 2D files based on the old lighting, I have to rebake it. So I wanted to do this so you could see the difference. So if it doesn't look bright, it's dark, it's because you didn't use a two-sided HDRI. So we're going to rebake that. You don't have to change the settings; they're all good. Just click bake, and then wait. And then when you're done, the AO is going to look way better. Again, it's doing its business. I should be talking because otherwise you're going to think the video crashed. I'm going to have a sip. Oh, it's done. Okay, so now it looks way better. All right. Or to me, it looks way better. I don't know what you think, but to me, it looks way better. So let's go back over here and look at it now. It's a lot more consistent. Right? It looks a lot better. Anyway, so that's what you have to do just to set up Substance Painter to be able to use it. So now we can actually drag stuff on here. So you have things in your library over here. You have all these different materials and things that you can use. You have a section called materials, and those are just simple PBR materials that have been created in Substance Designer. And all you do is pick it, and then you drag it on the thing you want it to go on, which is this one, and let's see what happens. There it is. I've applied the wood to this, and it looks like that. Right? And if I were to export that and bring it into Second Life, it's going to look a lot like that. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be exactly the same because this is a much better graphic engine than what we have in Second Life. But it's going to be pretty close and way better than what you can do in Photoshop. So this actually looks really good. Now that's a simple material. If you look over here in your layers palette, you can see the list of. You can have multiple layers and you can blend them and you can do stuff. So if you wanted to put like dirt or dust on here, you could do that. Or if you wanted to add scratches, you can do it. All different kinds of things you can do in Substance Painter. But this is just a simple material. It's only one thing. It's not a folder. It's just this wood grain texture. That's the difference between a simple material or a plain material and what we call smart materials. So if I were to click on this one, this is smart materials. They're way more complex. So I have some down here, like this one here called Wood 1. Let's put that in here. Notice it looks very different. You have lines like this curved line here. You have some scruffiness down here. You have some scratches built into it. You have a high gloss look. Now, where does all that come from? Well, if you look in your layers at this Wood 1, notice it's a folder icon next to it as opposed to the simple material down here that doesn't have that. And if I want to switch between these, I can just like turn them on like that and turn this one off. Turn them both off, you have nothing. Turn on the one you want. Turn them both on. But you notice that there's a change happening when I turn this lower one on. That's because there are things, this is cumulative, and so you can get in a lot of trouble if you don't remember that. This is cumulative top down. So the top is the most outermost texture that's applied to your object, but the ones below it can carry through depending on how they're set up. So there's some distortion that takes place in this original wood texture that added some like dents into the wood, and those dents are carrying through. So if you don't want that to happen, you make sure you turn off the ones on the bottom, or you delete it out of here. But anyway, so this has like I said, this has a folder because it's a smart material. So this smart material, if you expand that folder, it has a bunch of stuff in here. Well, you could basically manually do this by taking all of these things from over here and dragging them in and building this out yourself. More or less, you could reproduce a lot of this. But this was done in Substance Designer. It's a different application. So in Substance Designer, you actually create these materials and these smart materials. And so somebody went in Substance Designer and built this out and says, okay, I want it to do these things. Well, here's some of the advantages and disadvantages of materials and smart materials. So let's go back to this plain material. So if you remember, I said there was some of these where the wood grain is wrong. This one, the wood grain is right. It's oriented so that on my boards it goes with the length of the board. So is this one. The wood grain is correct, right? But I'll show you one that I think it's down here. I think this one, it goes the other way. Yep. So you can see the wood grain here goes the other way. Well, it doesn't look so terrible, but that's not the way it should normally be. Normally that wood grain would go the other way. Well, with a simple material, let's go back to our simple material. With a regular simple material like this, you have some controls in this properties. Well, this one doesn't have that. Okay, there it is. I have to click on it. So I click on the material, and then this properties panel pops up. You'll notice that there's a tiling. So if I wanted to have, I can change the grain, make it smaller by tiling this, and you can make it as wild or as crazy as you want. Put it back where it was. See, that's actually kind of a big grain, so maybe maybe that's actually better, right? Or those knots look gigantic, right? So maybe I want to make it even smaller. There we go. Now it's starting to look more normal, right? So I have the ability to do this with simple materials. I can go in here and I can change the tiling. The other thing I can do is I can change the rotation. So if I did have one that was sideways, I could come in here and put a 90-degree rotation on it, and now it's going to go the other way. And I could fix that. But no, 0. But you can't do that as easily with these smart materials. Okay, so in the smart material, you have all these different components. So you have to go into them individually, one by one, and notice there's a rotation here. Well, some person created that rotation for a reason. If I go in here and start mucking with it, it's going to change the output, and I might screw the whole thing up. So there's not an easy way to change the orientation or the rotation for the entire smart material. It's just like one rotation and everything changes. You can't do it. You have to go in and manually do it. The other thing you can do with simple materials that's a lot easier to do than it is with smart materials is you can change the color. So the color of this was set to here, the wood color, but I can go in and change that. So I want to have blue boards. I can make my boards blue. I want to make them green. I can go in here and say my boards are now green. Okay, and that it's permanent. So I have now screwed that up totally. And I don't know what color it was originally, so I can't go back. But what you can do is you just delete this and put the original one back on. Oh, sorry, it wasn't that one. It's a simple material. It was this one. Remember, these are all cumulative, so I keep adding them in here. It's like I'm adding multiple of the same things. There. Now I went back to this one. Okay. To slide this down, it's Alt and then click your middle mouse button and pull it down. All right, so that's one thing you can do is you can change the color, you can rotate it, you can tile it, but they also, a lot of these simple materials have presets. And so you can actually pick a different style of wood altogether. So this one, I don't know why they did this. The default isn't listed in the preset. So if you change the preset, you can't go back to the original. You have to copy it back on. I don't know why the original one is not listed in the presets. I would complain about that. All right, so you can just pick a different preset. And now you have a different wood look. Pick a different preset. You have a different wood look. So that's 4 different woods that you get from one PBR. And in Substance Painter, you literally just pull down that panel and you get a completely different look, and then you can export it into Second Life and you have 4 different textures instead of 1. So that's a really, really cool thing. And again, that's on simple materials, the standard materials. It's not on the smart materials. Anyway, so for now, that's enough in Substance Painter. It was just to whet your appetite. We're going to come back and do more in it later. For the next part, we're going to go back and work on our model in Blender. So that was the end of part 3, and I'll see you in a little bit, and we'll do part 4.